we are working very hard to do that. We are focused on it. And to ask everyone to collectively be involved in this. Because really, for us to be the safest, it will require us to work together as one university to do everything we can to look out for one another. So thank you for coming to listen, to learn about the resources that you have at your disposal, to ask questions, to provide additional input on training and other things you'd like to see. And I'm very grateful to turn over the presentation to Dr. Karen Lange and Dan Meuwissen. Karen is our Vice President of Student Affairs. Dan is our Director of Public Safety. They also are the co-chairs of our University Action Response Team. So they have really strong leadership roles on our campus in helping us ensure our safety. And we thought it would be helpful for them to lead the discussion, to share what some of these resources are. They have about 16 slides they're going to go through with you. And then we really do want to leave time for your questions. So be thinking about those questions. So thank you very much again for coming, and I look forward to the discussion. Karen and Dan.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Dan and I are happy to have an opportunity to talk with all of you about safety on campus. As Julie said, my name is Karen Lange. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs, and I've been here a little over 32 years, and during that time have worked in residence life and the Dean of Students Office and now the Vice President's Office. So I spent 15 years here as the Dean of Students. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our University Action and Response Team, but before I start, at our last meeting with Student Affairs, one of the commitments we made to each other is because we do a lot of programming here on campus. And we made the commitment that every time we started a program, what we're going to do is point out the exits in the facility that we're in. So I spent a lot of time in this building, especially when I did orientation years ago before we had the Anderson Student Center. And I can tell you there's the double doors in the back. There's exits both to my right and to my left. And there's also exits behind us. Those are exits that go out to the hallways in OEC. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our University Action and Response Team. When Dan and I are sharing this presentation today, and he's going to talk a little bit more about general safety. And the University Action and Response Team is a cross-departmental team that works closely together in response to a crisis or an emergency on campus. We're not there on site when something happens. We are there afterwards. And sometimes we are there, we may meet for an hour to talk about what happened and response and plans. And sometimes we meet for several hours, several days, several weeks. I remember one year when we had a missing student, our University Action and Response Team met every single day for a month, and that included the weekends. So let me just tell you a little bit about our history and share with you who is on the University Action and Response Team. And there's several people in the room on this team, so when we get to that part, I'm going to ask you to stand. We used to have what we called a crisis response team, and that team would meet on a regular basis anytime there was an incident that happened on campus. And then in the early 2000s, we changed it to the University Action and Response Team. And the reason that we did that was because of some of the things happening on campus, and also because some of the federal mandates that were coming out of the Department of Education. So not only did this team now respond to incidents on campus, but we do planning. We do event planning for if something happens, how would we do this? We do something called a tabletop exercise, where we actually pretend like something is happening on campus, and we work through every single piece that we would do. So it might be a tornado, it might be an active shooter, whatever it is, and we talk about what would we do during this time. So we actually practice doing that. So let me share a little bit about who's on our team. So you can see all the different departments across campus that are involved in the University Action and Response Team. And as I said, we do both short and long-term crisis planning. And when we plan for a crisis, and we also plan for emergencies. So as I mentioned, a tornado that would hit campus would be more of an emergency, an ongoing process and planning, where a crisis might be a short-term event. Maybe we have a suicidal student or something along that nature, and that would be more of a short-term event that we would work closely with. So our University Action and Response Team, I'm going to show you their pictures and everyone who's on that team. So if you are in this room and you are on the University Action and Response Team, could you please stand so people can see who you are? I recognize several people in the room, so thank you for being here. Thank you. And thank you for your good work. I'm also going to acknowledge Linda Bachman, who's sitting down in front. So when we talk about our overall University Action and Response Team, Dan and I co-chair that, but we also have what we call our mini UARTs, and Linda co-chairs that with Dan. So if there's a crisis on campus, Linda and Dan and the group, a smaller group from the University Action and Response Team, will meet to determine next steps. And that will include Erin Mackey, who's our Director of Residence Life, and it'll include Madonna McDermott, who's a nurse practitioner and Executive Director of Health and Wellness, and includes Steve Maurer, who's a PhD psychologist, and includes Sister Sharon Howell, who has been here many, many years. It includes Susan Anderson, our Director of Academic Counseling. And they actually have a standing meeting every Monday, and they talk about, okay, what happened over this weekend? We have concerns about students, and how do we follow up with those concerns that we have? So, okay, we're ready for the next one? Okay, so I explained a little bit about the Diversity Action and Response Team, and now to talk a little bit about personal safety. Dan? Oh, DART, I'm sorry. got the order a little mixed up. So Dan is going to talk a little bit about DART, and then I'll come back up and talk about personal safety.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us today. It's my great pleasure to introduce something to you that many of you are not aware of, and that would be our Diversity Action Response Team, very similar to the UART team, which is University Action Response Team. This is a group of, it's a small group of senior representatives of the university that get together, and it's a proactive team designed to get ahead of the curve in issues of diversity and inclusion. Our goals are very clear that we want to try to anticipate what we might envision happening on a university campus, and in doing that, we want to know then how would we respond. Given that, we want to know that we're consistent and transparent. My main goal today is to introduce this department to you, or this team to you, so you recognize that anytime you see a racial or a dynamic incident that's taking place on campus, I want you to rest assured that this team is meeting and identifying possible recommendations to put to the senior administration as to how we should respond to the university. We've started about 1.5 years ago. It's been more formal for the last year. I do chair that one. We're going to see the members in a minute, but we have a very strong mission statement, and we have very strong convictions, all tied to an inclusive, safe, open, friendly community for us. So, again, our members are up there right now. If they would like to stand, they represent specific aspects of the campus. It's very small and dynamic on purpose, and that's for us to be able to meet quickly, make strong recommendations, forward it on, and to act quickly. Now, it is different than the UART. We do work hand in hand with UART. You'll notice many of the members are part of the team, but the University Action Response Team is the one responding to the incident. DART is the one making recommendations and trying to be consistent and making a overall umbrella of a safe, inclusive atmosphere for this campus. So then we're going to get back into now what we're really here for today, and that's your own personal safety plan. Primary goal in an emergency, of course, is your safety. What I'd like to start with is, what is an emergency? In this case, for what we're doing today, an emergency is an incident that threatens the life and or property of the university that requires urgent response from many. The goal of that for you as a personal safety plan is to start planning ahead, taking responsibility for yourself, thinking and acting wisely. This doesn't happen, I'm just reading it off, but this doesn't happen automatically. It's not something that you just turn on and off. You have to train for it, you have to think about it, you have to forecast, and you have to do some scenario-based thinking and planning in order for you to respond quickly and efficiently in a true emergency. It's very important that we all recognize that campus safety is everybody's responsibility. It's not just the public safety team or the administrators or the UR team or the DART team. It's each and every one of us, and we all play a role in this. Most of our safety on this campus is designed for the prevention of any kind of activity, right? We respond to the incidents and we take care to plan for, but 90+% of our efforts go into preventing any kind of disasters or issues that may take place on campus. So that means involvement. Some of the things that we're talking about is staying in the living and in the now when a dynamic situation takes place. What do you know? What are the things you have? What are the questions that you should be asking yourself in this emergency, and how do we respond through it? Most emergencies are very dynamic. You know, they come up quickly and you don't really know what they're going to be. However, if you pre-think a lot of them, as we'll walk through in the safety plan in a minute, you can draw upon other situations and other scenarios that you've used and dealt with in the past to respond to what you're dealing with now. And that's that muscle memory that we're talking about, and that's the planning, and that's the programming that we want to get you started on. So Karen, I think you were going to take this next little piece, resource for safety planning.
So as you're thinking about this, we had some handouts when you walked in today, and I hope that no one was picking up this purple folder for the first time. I hope that you got this either at your orientation through Human Resources or new faculty orientation, or when we initially distributed these a few years ago. So hopefully you have one. If not, please take another one and take it back to your office. What I'm going to ask you to do, because you were all so great about joining us today, is I want to share some resources with you and ask you to be the person that goes back, if you're not the lead person in your unit or your department or your area, to go back and say to the lead person, at our next staff meeting, I would like to do some planning around office safety. And so we gave you some resources today. You also, if you go, we have a website, it's called St. Thomas Cares. If you go on that website, you're going to see all these resources along with the public safety website. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of these with you and then share a little bit more with the purple folder too. So this template, which you had a chance to take when you walked in Minneapolis, we sent them over there, so hopefully you have these too. This template is something that we'd like you to talk about within your staff meeting. We also gave you a sample one from the Dean of Students office. And Bill and Mike and Dan are all willing to come to any of your staff meetings to work through this with you, to talk about an office safety plan and how you can create an environment that is safest for you. So in this example with the Dean of Students office safety plan, some of this sounds really simple, but it's really important. So for example, the first one is to have a directory in your office. So in my office, there's 5 of us, and I know everybody's phone numbers because I have a sheet of paper on my bulletin board that says that. But I don't normally use them because I normally walk next door and talk with someone. So just something as simple as that is knowing everyone's extensions in your office area is really important. Communication. If you're going to have a meeting with a student and you're worried about that meeting, you're going to give them some bad news, you're following up on a paper or an exam they didn't do very well, that you let someone else know. You let someone else know in your office that you're concerned about this meeting and that they should walk by. You can contact public safety. They'll come over in their plain clothes and just sit right outside your office door or just be in the area. So trust your instincts on that. We always have a rule not to meet with a student after hours. If it's after 4:30 and it's a student that you don't necessarily know, or it's a situation that you're concerned about, We don't recommend you meet with them after the building or the office has closed. And also, if you're in here after hours, we encourage you to call public safety and let them know. If you're in here Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, you're working on a project, just call them and let them know you're in their office, so when they're doing their rounds, they know that you are there. So a couple other things. If a student comes in or someone comes in and you're concerned about information you're going to share with them, or you're concerned about their behavior from past interactions, you can ask them to leave their backpack out in that outer area. And you can set up some guidelines. You can make sure you don't completely shut the door. And again, communicate with each other. I remember one time when I was in the Dean of Students office, and Sister Sharon's office was right next to me, and she was meeting with a student, and I could hear that student crying in my office. I knew I knew Sister Sharon wasn't in danger. I knew the student wasn't in danger, but I just popped in, knocked at the door, and just said, "Are you okay?" And it even just gave that student an opportunity to kind of catch her breath and slow down, and it let Sister Sharon know that, I'm still here, I'm around. So even just doing those simple kinds of things when you're meeting with students that you might be concerned about is really a critical way for your own safety. So Dan's going to talk a little bit. We talked a little bit more here about potentially violent behaviors, and he's going to address that a little bit later on. But the other piece, there's two more pieces that I want to talk about. One is called faculty preparedness, and this was something that Rob Riley sent out to all the faculty in the fall. And this is something pretty simple for faculty to do too. The most important thing, when you come to class, have a charged cell phone. If there's going to be an alert on campus, you want to know about that. And make sure you've signed up for our alert system, because that's how we let faculty, staff, and students know when something is happening on campus. So for faculty at the very first class, if you could do the same thing I did, point out the exits and get to know your students. Know who they are. If students have any kind of disabilities, they may come and talk with you privately about that. So if there is an emergency situation and someone's hearing impaired, for example, that that student may be more vulnerable during an emergency kind of situation. So the other thing is students will look to you as the faculty member in the room. Our students have been practicing and preparing for an active shooter since they've been in kindergarten. And that wasn't my experience when I went through elementary school or high school. But our children are preparing and planning. Unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. And they are used to looking to the teacher for some direction. So we ask you as faculty to be that person that is able to give some guidance, and again, to kind of know your students, know their backgrounds as much as you can, and know who might need some extra assistance. So the other piece of information that I want to share with you is the purple folder that I talked a little bit about earlier. So I suggest keeping this in a place where you can find it. This actually was a recommendation made by a faculty member a few years ago, Corey Carvalho. She came to me and said, "Oh, I saw this folder at another school, and it's great. Can we do something like this?" So Rachel, was in the Dean of Students office at the time, worked with some of our interns in the counseling center and put together this resource. This has all the policies. So if you're wondering about FERPA, who can I talk to, what can I say, that's listed on here. I think the most important thing on here is to trust your instincts. Every single one of you work with students every single day. Whether you work with them in the classroom, whether you work with them in the dining services, wherever you work on campus, you have some interaction or contact with students. So if you notice something, then you need to say something. And I think of an example that I had one time with a student who, I always saw him around campus. He was always really well-groomed and always wore really nice clothes. And then one day I saw him and he had a hat on and he hadn't shaved and his shirt was untucked, which was, for him, that was unusual. That's not necessarily unusual for all students, but for him, that was unusual. And I didn't think too much about it. And then I saw him again, like 10 days later, and it was the same thing. And I thought, something's going on. Now that, if I said to somebody, oh, something's wrong with that student, he's wearing a hat and he hasn't shaved, they think, really? But I addressed that student, and he was going through a major crisis in his life, was able to get him some help. So again, just kind of trust your instincts about what may or may not be going on with students, because you know them the best. You have regular daily interaction with them. So what should you do if you're concerned? Call the Dean of Students office, call public safety, call counseling, call academic counseling. All those resources are here, and the staff that work in those departments, they talk every single day. So you don't have to worry like, oh, I didn't tell the Dean of Students, I told someone else. Well, as long as you hit one of those people in one of those departments, they're going to have communication about a particular student. And so if we need to do intervention, we will do that. You heard me talk about our team that meets every Monday afternoon. They also meet if there's a situation where they need to follow up on a particular student. And these are staff that have been here a long time, that understand the systems at St. Thomas and outside of St. Thomas. I'm always amazed whenever I meet with Madonna McDermott in situations like this. She knows so many healthcare providers in the Twin Cities, and she's always able to connect. If we've sent a student to the hospital, for example, she's able to connect and get more information around what's going on with that particular student. And that's really helpful as we make plans for what are our next steps. So inside this folder, you see a lot of recognize, respond, refer, and report. As Dr. Sullivan said at the beginning, it's really all up to all of us if we notice something that's unusual. And even if you think it's not that unusual, I promise you, if you call one of our offices, we're not going to say, oh, that sounds silly. We're gonna take it very seriously. And if it's a student, many times, I know when I was the Dean of Students, many times when I'd get a call from a faculty member, that name would ring familiar to me, and we may have already been working with that student in a particular situation. So we don't want you to ever be hesitant. I remember with one student in particular, someone called academic counseling about the student's behavior. The student was sharpening pencils over and over, which it's not that unusual, but in this particular situation, the person called academic counseling. A faculty member called and said, oh, this is what this student did in my class. It was a little odd, but not like over the top that you're worried about that person. But then a third person called about an incident in the residence hall. When you put it all together, we realized that this person was having a psychotic break that day, and we were able to address them. But if we hadn't gotten all those phone calls, we may not have been able to address that individual person. So I can't stress enough the importance for you to take responsibility as you think about what happens on campus. And as we know, as Dr. Sullivan said, there's no one that can say it's going to be perfectly safe, but there are things that we can do to try and make it more safe. So Dan, you're going to come back and check a little further? Yep.
Thanks, everybody. I want to remind everybody again that real clearly, this is an orientation and an entry-level introduction to your own personal safety plan. We're throwing a lot of information out, and I'm about ready to throw all kinds at you again. So just keep in mind the goal, again, is to kind of awaken you to developing your own plans and starting to prepare your mindset for how we handle emergencies, i.e. how you would handle an emergency in a situation. So in doing that, every emergency is important on campus. Everybody probably sees these. We have them in the classrooms. We have them all over campus. But this is a great summary document. I want to talk to you just a little bit about these emergencies and make sure you're thinking down the same line as we would like to have you go. So in a fire, everybody knows the fire alarm goes off, you leave the building, right? Have you really given that much thought? When Karen came in earlier today, she identified the exits and the egresses. I challenge each of you for your work environments, and whether that's your classroom or whether that's your office or wherever it might be, to take time, identify how you get in and out of that facility, identify what it might look like if there was no lights and there was smoke on the floor, or where you were on the floor and smoke above you and you had to crawl out. What happens if the stairwell that you think you're going to walk away from is blocked and there's fire there? How do you get out? What's the next option? Did you go back in your office? Did you find another route? Can you go into your office, break a window, and go out the main floor? I don't know, but I'm asking each of you because your areas are significantly different from everybody else. You need to start planning ahead on that. Medical emergencies, I talk a lot about in the classroom, but I see a lot of staff as well here today. What happens if you're the first one on a heart attack? Have you ever had to deal with that? Have you ever made a 911 call? Have you ever called 5555 and talked to our emergency staff? We have very professional dispatchers, but it's scary the first time. Have you ever seen a seizure? What does that look like? What about somebody bleeding really bad? Have you thought about how you would respond to that? Have you thought about how you would stop the bleeding, who you would contact, how you would make the next step? Those are just things to prepare yourself as you're walking through your personal safety plan. I want to jump back. Remember, there's a couple different options of personal safety plans on the USD Care site, or St. Thomas Care site, and the public safety site. So there's a little, it's an outline for you. It's not hard, it's not complicated. We did that on purpose. We did that so you could develop it to any level you wanted to make it. If you're good at this and you want to continue going into depth, you can bring that plan up. If you want to just know the basics and understand how you'll respond, it's simplistic enough that you can allow yourself to take it to the level you want it to be at. Severe weather, real quickly, because we're going to get into the active shooter stuff. Severe weather, where do we go? Does your office have a communication plan for severe weather? Do you guys have a weather radio in your location? If not, maybe that's a really inexpensive purchase that would help all of you. Where do you go? Down to the lower level? Inside? Away from windows? We know that one of our colleagues Gustavus, lost how many buildings? You know, I think it was like 150 some odd million dollars worth of damage. It can happen. We have tornadoes that come right down I-94, come through us. It hits us as wave when it hits Minneapolis first and Hennepin County, and then you see it cross over, and then you'll get the alert for Ramsey County, and it comes over the St. Paul campus. In Minnesota, lucky for us, then there's a wave right behind that comes out again, right? We do put out emergency notifications on that if it's a tornado warning for our specific location, so you will get that. But what you won't get is you won't get repeated ones on it. I'm not going to tell you that there's a tornado warning at 3 o'clock and then one at 3:15 and one at 4. So understand you're going to get the one blast. Suspicious criminal activity. Do you know how to call the 555 number? What's suspicious? What's criminal? What should that look like? Those are things that I think you can walk through. Bomb threat and explosions are very difficult. If you have any knowledge of that, please just call the public safety office right away, because those are dynamic. We need to know what's in that space, what's in that zone, what's unfamiliar, what's different today than might have been here yesterday. Hazardous materials and spills, science buildings, that's another critical one. That's a more in-depth type of response thing, but the protocol, obviously you're going to get yourself in a safe zone, you're going to seal as much as you can off, and you're going to make phone calls, right? And you're going to protect those that are injured. Number one is life safety, right? Go from there. So then we'll go to the active shooter piece, and I think that's what people want to talk about, and it's a really difficult time for us right now. Society is got to see what slide we're on. Society is changing a little bit, and it's very dangerous if you watch the news and the media. Fortunately for us, it doesn't happen as much as it seems like it happens on university campuses. But we need to be prepared for that, right? It does happen. We've seen it. We're watching it on TV all the time. So how do we respond to an emergency situation, an active shooter? Well, we follow the run, hide, fight, right? That's what we endorse. But people think that it's a linear thing, that you run first, then you hide, then you fight. Now, I want to talk to all of you and tell you, no, it's not. You have three options on the table for that incident. You evaluate that incident as it's happening, which one makes the most sense for you, right? Is it run, is it hide, or is it fight? They're all on the same playing field. But I want to stand in front of you and tell you, you have the right to be safe and go home. That means if your life is in danger, You need to act. And you need to get yourself to the level of excitement that the person in front of you is that has a weapon, right? If they're in there trying to shoot you, they're all jacked up, right? They're running way up here. You have to get yourself up to that level too, to protect yourself, to save yourself, and to go home safely at night. I can't tell you that there's going to be somebody there to tell you what to do and how to do it, so that's why we have to do this muscle memory thing, and we have to walk through our scenarios, and you have to look at your environment. Find out, identify, is this a safe zone for me? Is this classroom, it opens to the outside, what do I do with that? It's a glass door. Those are all dynamics of a university campus. We can't change that. What we can change is how we look at it and how we respond to protect ourselves, right? There's no universal door lock that I can give anybody on this campus that works for all our doors. We have 50-some different buildings, all designed differently. So I can't give you one thing and you another thing and you another thing and hope that when something happens, it works. What I can do is teach you and tell you to go, how does my environment look? What can I do individually at this site and each time I'm in this room or this room or this room? What are my tools? What are my weapons? What are my escape routes? How do I make the phone call? Does everybody have the emergency number in their cell phone? I really highly recommend that. In emergency, you remember number 8, but you sure don't remember 651-962-5555, right? I'm going to give you some response of public safety as well because it ties into you. Your job is to be safe for that 5 to 10 minutes, which is a normal incident timeline, right? So we're going to make safe somehow for 5 to 10 minutes, whether that's hiding, whether that's fighting, whether that's running. And if you run, you leave. Don't worry about everybody else. You're going to have some obligations. You're going to go, what about these people? What about these people? You bring them along with you. If they don't follow you, you leave. You've asked them, you've told them, but don't let them slow you down. You got to be the number one in your mind. Okay, so we learn of an active shooter on our campus. I'm going to just walk through this a little bit so you have an understanding how you might want to plan your response. We're going to put out a message to you. If there's an imminent threat or a danger, a message is going to come out in the rave, and you're going to get the UST alert, right? I can tell you that at the time that alert's coming out, there's already shooting going on, right? Because otherwise, how would I have known it's going on? So you're in the mode, you're responding. We're going to respond, and we're not going to put ourselves in danger either, but we're going to set up perimeters. We're going to know where the shooter is, what's going on. We're going to try to evacuate people. We're going to try to control zones, and we're waiting for St. Paul Police to come in, who we've had the luxury of training with multiple times, and we brought them into our campus to train in our facilities. What a huge thing. You'll also see that you'll always see St. Paul police officers walking around our campus. That's on purpose. We do that on design. We have a lunch program out there. We take them and we use them for off-duty stuff. We invite them for training. We invite them for classrooms. There's a good reason for that. We want them familiar with our facilities and familiar with us and our response. My associate director, Mike, and I, we've had the luxury of working with the SWAT team a number of times to learn how they're going to come back and how they're going to respond to us. So we prepare our team how to do that, right? So we're meeting them with the right tools, the right equipment, right information, so they can process the thing and make safe the situation. So I just wanted to give you that zone so you understand where you're at in your planning. And this is an entry-level scenario. This isn't sitting down with you one-on-one or with your teams and walking through how do we design this. We're happy to do that, love to do that. Give us a call and we'll set it up. Can't do them all at once, please, I understand that, but we will do it and we're going to make a commitment out of it. The university is also committed to working with human resources and academic affairs and public safety and other facilities or other areas, excuse me, to continue this training and offer a training session for faculty and staff on your own personal safety for the campus. So we've made a commitment to that. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to roll out, but having given you the commitment, that means we will be putting something forward to you. So I'm going to leave it at that, I think, and open it up for questions because there's a lot I think people want to visit about. Yes. Yes, we do. We have the same program in Minneapolis. I will tell you our relationship's a little better in St. Paul than Minneapolis, but it's tight. It's good. Oh, yeah, the question is, I talked a lot about our relationship with St. Paul Police and having them trained and stuff. We do also have a very good relationship with Minneapolis as well. We work hard at building that one. I said we're a little stronger in St. Paul than in Minneapolis, but it's still very good.
The other question has to do with, lock the door, barricade the door. And I teach in 3 or 4 different buildings over the course of a year. And most of them, you can't lock the doors. And a lot of them, the doors open out rather than opening in. So what's the recommendation in that kind of a situation when you're in a classroom?
Still the same theme. And I talk openly about this with faculty that are asking me this question. I believe you have every right to have your personal safety plan and carry equipment that says this might work for me in this classroom. I can't tell you what that is, but if there's a sleeve or a wedge or something that you think might be fixable, what I tell you right away is, number one, if it's a bad door, I'd look at immediately, is there a better location for me to move my class? That's the first thing I'd look at. Second, it's still going to be barricade. If the door goes in or out, it's not going to matter. You're going to have to put stuff in front of the door and close it off the best you can. And if they come in that door, that brings you to the next level, right? It means that you're going to have to respond in any way you can to go home safely that night. Other questions? Hi, Susan.
I work in engineering,
Thank you.
and I've already had a conversation with Janet from the Marketing Insights and Communications team about this. This is in the realm of all for the common good.
Mhm.
My daughter was at Minnehaha Academy that they had the explosion last
Yes.
year, and for about a half an hour, I didn't know what campus she was at because it's upper and lower,
Right.
and their phones went out. And I just don't. Your whole plan is hinged on a phone number, but if the phone doesn't work, what do we do?
We actually, thank you for that. That's a great question. Our RAVE announcement system, I call it RAVE. It's our UST alert. It's a RAVE program. That has multiple redundancies, not based on our phone lines alone. I can call that through a cell phone. I can call their company and they can put it out for me. We can do it email to them to get it out. There's a number of options that can take place for that. But in our plan, our university plan, we do cover that. And it gets all the way down to, we have megaphones that we use. We have, our squads are designed with speaker systems on it, and we have a runner system designed. Luckily, we haven't had to use that yet, but a runner system designed to communicate for us if our programs don't work and we can't communicate by cell phone. And we do anticipate cell phone in a university this big. If I'm going to say, if there was a tragedy, it would light up the cell phone towers, and we would have some difficulty. There's no question about that.
And can you remind us what the rules on guns on campus are, and are they the same on both campuses?
They are. The rules are very simple. It's not a gun-free campus. This is a weapons-free campus. Weapons refer to all types of, whether it's a projectile, a knife, a spear, a throwing stars, whatever would constitute a weapon are not allowed on campus. As far as the conceal and carry, or it's actually a carry permit for the state of Minnesota or private institution, we still do not allow them to carry unless they're in the course of their law enforcement or military function. Other than that, if you're legally carrying on our campus, you'll be asked to leave. You can legally carry, but we can also legally ask you to leave. The latest rendition of that, because of the new state laws and stuff, we will allow you to lock it in a lockbox within your car and continue to spend your day on our campus, but you will not be allowed to spend your day on our campus with a weapon. Does that answer that? There was. Oh, Dad asked, there was an accidental weapons discharge on our campus, and I think it was like, last year. And that is true. That was as clearly as I can state that. as a policy violation, and it was addressed in that manner. And I say policy as in, oh, that's not, no, that's a big policy deal, and it was responded to it in that manner. I will let you know, though, too, in that discharge, I hope all of you are signed up for the mass notification system, right? Because you will have seen emails, not emails, alerts from me in the past couple of years. I mean, I've had 3 or 4 of them that we've had weapons on or around the campus, that if it's an imminent threat, you're going to get those alerts. Those are, I want to talk just a second, those are, each situation has to be researched and understood and authenticated, I guess, as to what's the merit of the situation that we're dealing with. If I deem it's an imminent threat to the campus community, or there's a weapon, you're going to get it. If it's not an imminent threat, you're not going to get an alert in that manner. So I just want to clarify that for people.
We have a question in Minneapolis.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, is there a reason that we do or do not have to carry our IDs with us?
Actually, at the University of St. Thomas, you're always required to carry your ID. If you look on the back of it, it says that you're responsible to produce the ID and identify yourself at all times. And that's not a negative. Here's the deal. Our whole systems are based on identifying who we're speaking with and what we're dealing with. So anytime you have a door opened or a car jump-started or you call public safety for, I think we do somewhere between 25 and 27,000 service calls a year, your ID is what goes into our system. And I'm sorry if it looks like I'm turning my back on you. Your ID is how we program everything into our system, and our records management system is how you rebuild the day for legalities and for other reasons on the university campus. So we will continue to ID people as whenever necessary, I guess. Does that help?
I'm asking visibly.
Oh, visibly?
Visibly. It's one thing if somebody has their ID in their wallet, which I normally do, then you can see right now, when
Yep.
actually carrying it.
Yep, no, that's fantastic. There is reason for that. And it's right now, it's kind of in the schools, particularly in Minneapolis, that are working on it. Some of the schools themselves, or the colleges, are working towards wearing their identification badge, and that's really, in my world, fantastic. I'd love it to go all the way across campus. The real answer to that is, if you're a university employee and we're here to do the mission of the university, why wouldn't we want to know that you're an employee so somebody can ask you a question or you can identify yourself as part of the university? To me, it's just a very positive thing.
Good afternoon. A question kind of along those lines. Has there been a discussion of using your IDs to access buildings? It's just so easy to access all buildings, but especially for night classes or when you're in Minneapolis, you can really get anywhere within the campus.
Yeah, there was. Let me say, specific to Minneapolis, we've done a lot more on it, and that was based on, a lot of it had to do with the lucky opportunity we had the Super Bowl here. And there was, there was credible intel that said that we should probably be looking at who's coming and going into our buildings as well as we can. And that's not to say we're not open and inviting. We just want to be more open and invited, is I think the best way to put that. So in Minneapolis, we've rolled it in so your main primary doors are the main entrances, and that's because that's where we are stationed at, and so you have a direct line on it. Everybody can get into the side doors as long as you have your ID. You're all programmed into it. So a little inconvenience, yeah, maybe, but it's really a good move in Minneapolis, and it's already shown some positive response to it. So can we do it in St. Paul? We're a little bit further away. I mean, you got 4 buildings versus 50 some buildings, and we're not set up quite in that style yet, but I'd like to be. Sure.
question specifically about counseling and psychological services, which I know is geared towards our student body for the vast majority of it. But I know I've had some conversations recently with colleagues who, I guess I would just call it general anxiety about being on a campus. So I'm curious what the advice would be around that. Is it setting up the kind of consultations that you're describing to have a public safety officers come and talk through the process more? Or is that something that there are resources with counseling that would be good for an individual basis?
So we do have counseling and psychological services, as Jordan mentioned. So we have 4 senior staff members that are PhD psychologists. We have 3 interns, and then we have 3 master's prepared faculty, I guess, in that area. So it is open to students. We also, many of our health services, we have a large staff. We have an internist, we have a nurse practitioner who has a psychiatric background. So certainly for students, they can go to CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services. For staff and faculty, they can also go to health services. We've also just put out a Learn to Live program. We have worked closely with human resources, and this is open to all students, staff, and faculty. And this is an online program, so you're able to go online and fill out some assessments, and then it'll give you some recommendations of things that you can do. So am I answering your question? It was really about generalized anxiety. Yes. Learn to Live. Yes, and we've gotten great feedback on it, and we know that for students, we've had over 700 students that have used it and completely followed through it, and we're tracking faculty and staff also. And it's open to anyone who has a St. Thomas, www.stthomas.id information. Yep.
Just from another standpoint on it, we are here 24 hours a day. We do escorts, and we do escorts for everybody. And we're there for people. If you're anxious or have some concern about a class, all you got to do is give me a call or give one of my administrative staff a call, and we'll set something up. And we're happy to be there and happy to work with people. Having you feel comfortable is extremely important to us.
Quick question, and thank you for this presentation. I am in a building, Aquinas, that has key card access. Does that tell public safety that I'm here when I come in nights or weekends, or do I still need to call?
Yeah, you still need to call.
You do, okay.
I'm going to tell you that, no, it does, it will log it, but it's not active for us. It's not showing what you're doing or what that you're in there at that particular time. Amy asked a question that I want to say about evening access. If you're on campus late in the evening or off hours, please, I'm asking you, give us a call. Just call 5100 and say, hey, this is so-and-so, and I'm working late, and here's the office I'm in. Boy, do we appreciate that. And you'll appreciate that, too, because you don't like to step out of your office in the middle of the night when the doors are locked and the lights are off, and here's a public safety officer that just about walked into you. Same regard, they don't want to walk into people that they don't know are in the buildings either. So please, just make that phone call. That's awesome. I think that sounds like it. To wrap this up, on my behalf, thanks everybody for giving us this opportunity to visit with you. Again, it's an entry-level, early, pre-planning concept for you to start moving towards your own personal safety plan. And public safety is available for you to call. We have a number of people that can work individually with you or in groups to try to develop that. But I really appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Dr. Sullivan, do you have any other comments or?
Just thank everyone for coming, and again saying this is the beginning of a conversation. Start your own personal safety plan. Look for further opportunities for training, and if there's specific training you'd like to ensure that we are developing, let us know that. So thank you very much.